Hello, and this is Alicia Castillo Holly on the Funding Week. This is day number 3. We've been here so far. Thank you so much for being on the call. Remember that you can post your questions right here. Thanks, Bertita, for telling me right here in the middle where it said chat. And I am going to mute some of the participants so we don't have the distractions that we've had before with dogs, but you cannot mute yourself right here. Feel free to ask your questions here. I have a list of a ton of questions, and as usual, I'm trying to organize them in a way that it makes sense for us to answer several of them at the same time. One of the key questions that we have is about how do I find investors? So let's go back to the day number 1 and day number 2 and day number 3. So on day number 1, we talk about big ideas. I was surprised to see that a lot of people didn't think that they could come up with great ideas. We covered that part. On day number 2, we talked about how to start seeking funds. And we talked about breaking into paradigms, thinking about resources and not money, and thinking that you choose who you invite to participate in your idea. You're not only the chosen one. Now we're going to go funneling that right into the action. Here are some of the questions that you have asked. How can I find, I'm just going to read from here. How can I find investors that believe in my idea? Can I find investors from another country? Where I live, I don't find investors. I don't know if I want an investor or a donor. What can I do if I don't have any money? I've gotten to 2 bankers and they've said no. And the last one is, how can I trust the investors? So we have around 35 questions around those topics. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a step back and reflect upon what is the type of funding that we want to receive. I often see very interesting proposals targeting the wrong funding mechanism. Because I'm part of Sand Hill Angels, we see a lot of business deals through that, and also through my work in other countries. I tend to receive a lot of business ideas, and I love them, but you have to be careful about targeting the funding mechanism or the type of fund provider that is more appropriate for your idea, for the type of idea that you are trying to get off the crib. For example, some people want to get causes funded, and they're worthy causes, and they think that if they dress them up as a business, they would get an investor excited. Well, they should really look for a philanthropic avenue to get those ideas funded. Or some people say, well, this is a risky adventure, and venture capitalists should fund these. Well, venture capitalists don't want to throw money out the door. They want to invest and they want to contribute, and they want to see something that can transform the world and create wealth. So if you don't show that, chances are that you're not going to get them. The other thing that I find is that some people tend to look for funds from individuals that do not have the capacity to make the decision, and they get very frustrated by that. So what fund seekers fail to do is to understand the decision process behind the person making the decision to fund or not, or having the capacity to make that decision. You see, in the case of bankers and managers of VC funds, they're acting on behalf of others. They don't necessarily own their own money. They don't necessarily have ownership over the money that they're investing. So it's a different mindset. It could also be that you want to seek funds from a manager, from your corporation, from the company that you work, or you want to have support from the CEO or the entrepreneurs or another department. And or you're working in a public office and you want to get support from your boss. So that has different rules as well. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to go and do crowdfunding without really understanding the mindset behind and what drives people's decisions. So it is very important that you focus on a funding mechanism before you start spinning your wheels in the wrong funding mechanism. And then you start doubting that your idea is not good enough or that you're not good enough, when in reality, what it is that you're focused in a direction that is not the most appropriate one. Yes, you may get some funds, but it's just going to be harder. So if you're going to work harder, that's fine. Just work for a worthy purpose. Think, for example, I tend to tell people this is like selling ice to the Eskimos. It's not impossible. I mean, it is possible, but the value that they have to something that is readily available is low because it's over there. Or think about trying to sell diapers to babies. Yes, babies are the users, but they don't have the capacity to make the purchasing decision. So just have those things in mind when you're talking to people or trying to get the funds that you need to pay for their resources or get access to their resources so you can accomplish what it is that you want to do. Of course, there's the traditional entrepreneurs that are starting up a company and are trying to get seed funding. For those of you who do not know what seed funding is the first amount of capital a company gets that is not originated from the founders. And it's usually given by relatives and friends and some angel investors or some people outside their social network. That is what most people think about when they think about funding. When people think about funding, people think about a young company that is requiring funds from an angel investor or from somebody who believed in the idea or from a bank. But that is not necessarily the only case, and that's not what we're teaching in this course. We're giving you the big overview so you can choose how to use these. So the best way to get funds is to understand what is the most appropriate funding mechanism to your idea so the proposal and the efforts are better targeted. As I said, if you're going to sell something to the Eskimos, sell something that they value that they don't have. If you're going to sell something to babies, make sure that you are able to talk to the people who are capable of making the purchasing decision for them, because they're the user, but they're not the consumers. And yes, it is possible that you can find ways to shortcut those things, and that's very exciting and interesting, but chances are that that's going to be more difficult, and probably you would start feeling that your idea is not good enough or that you're not skilled enough, when in reality you're just targeting the wrong funding mechanism. Remember that in funding, like in traveling, the shortest route is the easiest route, and that's the one that's going to leave you more excited and rested, and you're going to enjoy it better too. So there are three basic funding mechanisms or categories of funding. We have to remember that funding is the process of receiving resources to execute activities to get things done. So it's a chain reaction. Investing and lending is the other side of funding. So investing is the process of providing capital to pay for resources to execute activities to get things done in return for a benefit. Lending is the same process, but they provide the capital in exchange for a benefit measure in interest. So there's two slight differences. When I explain about funding mechanisms, I want to help people understand the mindset behind the people making those decisions. So the one thing that I find that is pretty interesting and that is not readily available in the web or in the training courses about funding is this mindset. So because if you cannot put yourself in the shoes of the person making the decision, then it would be harder for you to understand them, and it would be harder for you to communicate and to move your model, or to choose not to engage with those funding mechanisms because they're just not appropriate for what you're going to do. So remember the babies and the doctors. A lot of people think, when they think about funding, the first thing that comes to their mind is going to the bank for us for a loan. So I would prefer to start with the debt mindset. In general, if you're starting something, you start with the equity. But because people tend to think that the way to get funded is to go to the bank, let's go and talk about the debt funding. And when you can relate to that mindset, then you can take appropriate actions. And that's what I want you to do. So think about the bills that you need to pay this month. Do you have a mortgage or do you pay rent? Do you need to pay for, do you have a credit card? Do you pay for your car or do you pay for public transportation? Your telephone bill, your phone bill? What about food? Do you have to pay for food? Have you thought about it? Do you go to the grocery store and buy food, or do you have to go to a restaurant or to another venue and pay for your food? What about electricity? And don't forget the taxes. What about the taxes? So think about the bills that you need to pay, what it is that you need to pay in the short term. Think about it. Do you wait until the payment day is approaching to see, to explore how you're going to have access to that money so you can pay for that? Or do you use a system that keeps you on track and helps you put aside the money so you have access to that money when you need to pay for that? If you're gonna go and have lunch today or dinner today, do you have the money to do that? And then you choose to do that? Or do you have a system where you save something so you know you have the money available to pay for the things that you need to pay? That money that you need has to be available. And you have those bills because you enter a dual promise. So you have access to something in exchange for a payment. The expectation is that you have access to those things because you're going to fulfill that promise. It is a short-term expectation. If you sit down or if you grab a bottle of water at some place, you hold it and you're going to pay for that. Or you pay for that and you get it. It's a short-term expectation. But it could also be a longer-term expectation. You can ask for a loan for your car or for your house, and you are expected to pay. They believed in you because you had the capacity to pay and because you have expressed the intention to pay through a previous behavior. Then they can make other promises because they receive your payment, and with that money that you pay them, they can pay other things. They can pay their employees, the employers, their suppliers, and even the government. And they can also make a profit from that, or they can choose to use that extra money for something else, or they might not have an extra money because that might be a cost as well. But you have both entered into a dual promise. Okay. This system of promise of payments is based on the clear expectation that there's no other benefits besides the ones that you've already agreed upon. The people or the organization that gives you a loan or that provides you a service in exchange for a payment does not expect another benefit. There's no unknown surprises. Even when you pay a tip, there's a certain expectation about what it is that you're going to pay for that. And the debtor is not evaluating your benefit to be able to extract a little bit of, or share a little bit of that benefit that you got from it. If you go to a nice event, to an opera house, or if you make a donation, the other provider of the resources that you need, which could be an experience or money, they don't expect you to go back and say, well, I enjoyed so much that I'm going to pay you twice as much. Or thank you so much for lending me money for my house. I enjoy my house so much, then I'm going to triple the mortgage. It doesn't work that way. Even if you purchase a house or if you purchase an equipment and you sell it at a surplus, the system that works on debt does not expect you to share those benefits. If I ask for a loan for my house and I sell the house for much more, I'm only obliged to pay the lender for the amount of money that we agreed that I was going to pay. That's what I feel comfortable with, but that's what they feel comfortable with too. So being a debtor means that someone believed in you enough to lend you some money. You use that money to get some benefits, and you pay a cost for having access to that money. Everything is pretty much clearly defined, and everything is expected. And when things don't work as expected, there is a problem. The only reason the system works is because the risk of not fulfilling the expectations is very low. So there are consequences if the system doesn't work, because everybody expects it to work. You expect the lender to give you the amount of money that you need. If you're paying with a credit card, you expect the funds to be there when you need them. And everything is about creating clear expectations for both sides. If you're seeking a loan, then you have to show that you have the capacity to pay under the conditions that you agree upon. In financial terms, it means that you can generate the income necessary to pay for the installments and eventually to pay off the whole amount, and you have the intention to do so. So that is the debt mindset. It is not money that you own, it's money that you owe. You have an obligation towards that money, and you act responsibly so you can fulfill those expectations, because everybody has the same understanding. Let's switch now to the equity mindset. Think about the money that you have available that is not tied to a future required payment. You can indulge yourself with an immediate purchase, you can invest it, you can save it, you can even afford to lose it. You can go on a vacation. I remember once talking to somebody who gambles in casinos, and she happened to say, well, you know, if I go to the movie, I don't expect to get a return. If I go to a casino, I spend the money and I expect that maybe I'll get a return. So money available for you to spend is it's free to be spent. It's disposable income. You can put aside part of that money for future expenses, and they need to be available not in the so near future, and you can play with it if you want. You can invest it to generate more money, but you do not invest the money that you need to be available to pay for your obligations. You put that in a separate area. If you want to have a reward later for the money that you're spending now, you are investing. But you can wait to get that reward. It's what it's called patient capital as well. Especially if your ability to pay for your daily or monthly expenses is not tied to that investment. The money that you have that is not tied to a clear obligation, it is yours freely to use for whatever it is that you want to do. That is the mindset of equity funding. It's money readily available without a purpose in the near future. It is not tied to any obligation, and it provides you with rewards because you own that money. That is the mindset of equity funding. So if we take it to a lifestyle, I can make the analogy that every day we have to sleep, we have to eat, we probably have to wash ourselves. Every single day we have to do that. So we have to spend some money doing those things. Those are part of like our obligations. But we also have some free time. And some people work, some people don't work. But you also have some free time, which is what we enjoy doing. So that is the two different mindsets. You need to understand that because people who are in providing funding from the debt side, the debt mechanism, are not as free as the ones are providing funds on the equity side, which is the side of the freedom and the disposable income. If you are an entrepreneur, or if you are a startup social entrepreneur, you have a cause or you have a new project, the resources that you put into is your time. So you are using your free time for your own enjoyment to create this project. And that is part of the resources as well. That's part of the equity funding. I'm reading a question here. We are not going to talk about sweat equity in this particular call, but I'll be happy to answer that in other calls or at the end of the call. Yeah. Now, there is a third mechanism. It is what I call the unfunding mechanism. It is seldom recognized. We don't find it in a lot of books. I wrote it in one of my books, but we don't have it in a lot of books or in a lot of academic research. Now, if you remember that funding is the process of receiving capital that you need to pay for the resources to get things done, well, funding mechanisms, they reduce or eliminate the need for funding, not the need to have access to resources. That is why yesterday I asked you to create a list of the resources that you need, because when you think in resources, not in money, you're open to unfunding mechanisms. And the best way to think about unfunding is to also recognize the mindset behind it. So think about the times when you were a teenager and you did not value things. Yes, that is right. That is the unfunding mechanism. Unfunding mechanisms, I find, are tied into a specific stage in the process. So people are excited because you can do things and they're willing to participate and help you out because it is always fun to help somebody get started into something. Once the structure of your idea is bigger and larger and you're more established, it is hard to find unfunding mechanisms. So you need to think about that. Let me give you an example. You might be able to use somebody else's office for free. Or somebody might want to share with you an office. Or somebody might want to tell you, here is an old computer, you're welcome to find that. Or somebody would tell you, I have a car, it's a typical garage thing that people think about. And it's also a way to get gifts. People give you something that they're not going to use, and they give it to you. Or people give you free advice like this. This is an unfunding mechanism as well. And people are just willing to help you out because you are not fully independent, but you're on the process. So people give you something to help you out, but it's not really a handout because they expect you to become independent and to move forward. And I like to think about when people are teenagers, because what happens is that the ones that receive unfunding mechanisms somehow can shift into feeling a sense of entitlement. And when you feel entitled, the unfunding process breaks down. So you can, I'll give you an example. Your uncle gives you a fax machine, and his secretary takes some minutes to help you out sending some papers. Suddenly you had access to those two resources, somebody who helped you out to send some papers and a fax machine. You didn't have to pay for that. And those 10 minutes would save you tens of hours of crafting the model or the format of the letter, or trying to find a way to do it, or driving to a FedEx or a Kinko's to get that fax out. Or another example is that your friend finds a store that might carry your products and talks to them about it and puts you two in touch. So immediately you save some time trying to find a new client. Or your lawyer refers you to your accountant, or your banker tells you, oh, this is a person that might benefit from interacting with you, or help somebody else. And then you can connect two people together and move forward in an easier way. You just benefited from hundreds of hours on unpaid work. And people do that because they just like that. They just like to help you out. A traditional unfunding mechanism is also crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is the process of receiving funds from people, and it's usually funds from people who want to help you out carry a new project. And there's many, 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 many sites. I happen to like 3. I like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Tiva. And some have some form of combinations. And they just had to change the laws in the US to be able to accommodate for that. So And funding mechanisms are freely available mix of help and resources. And sometimes that helps becomes unannounced. Sometimes you're requested. Sometimes you're requested and it's rejected. Sometimes you don't request it and it's shifted. And it's not the focus of your attention, but it's complementary. And in the larger scheme of things, the contributions that you receive are very important, especially during the initial stages, because it helps you shape your idea in a way that is more practical. So to be able to appreciate the funding mechanisms, you need to think about 4 important contributions. The first one is that the small help goes a long way. It helps you reshape your model. There's no need to fit your model to fit that help to your existing model. It's usually the other way around. You use that help to shift some things. It doesn't imply any obligation or any other reward. And that is very interesting because you can pre-sell and you can offer some products and services before they're completely done. They're in the prototype stage. So you don't have to be perfect. And that's part of the beauty of that. And the last one is that help comes as it is. It's not an input to the process. It is part of the process. So you're not as formally established when you get funding mechanisms. You can also have grants applied to grants as well. And it just helps you diminish and reduce your needs of funding. So those are the 3 basic funding mechanisms: equity, debt, and funding. Why is this important to you? Because many people try to look for debt when they should look for equity, and many people look for equity when they're much better off if they look for debt. And many people forget to use unfunding. So I'm going to leave this open to questions now because I see a lot of chats here popping up, and go through that. Yes. Bartering is a type of unfunding. You can barter something. So you can say, or you can trade. You can say, I'll give you this and you give me that. And it doesn't go into your financial statements as you don't need the cash to pay for it. If you reduce or don't need to ask for funding, that is unfunding. Crowdfunding is an increasing funding mechanism. It's very valuable. You can do crowdfunding if you're not in the US. Just go Google crowdfunding. There's a ton of options. I did a blog post on crowdfunding. I will send you the link. If you're on our mailing list, I'll send you the link. If you're not in our mailing list, get into it, or get into facebook.com/wealthing, or go to the Wealthing Institute /bonus to get on the mailing list, or Google crowdfunding. There's just a lot of that. Business plan competitions are also parts of unfunding, as well as grants. Pre-sales, you can use pre-sales. I will be happy to entertain more questions about unfunding. This is very, very exciting. You can have sponsors as well. It depends. Sponsors are usually a way of funding causes and nonprofits. So it's a little twist to that. You also have factoring. If you want, I might be able to have just a question and answer session just on crowdfunding. There's another question coming here. No, you cannot find angel investors from another country. That is just a lie. I know people say, yes, no, that's not true. I lived in 9 countries and I work as angel investors in 3. Angel investors don't invest in companies outside of their geographic region by definition, because you want to help out. There's a lot of people that receive funding from angel investors in Silicon Valley. They move here or they establish a presence here. And there's a lot of incubators and accelerators in the area that fulfill that purpose. Venture capitalists also invest in companies that have a presence geographically. They usually have a mandate it's a little bit more structured and more legal. So it is very unlikely that they can invest in another country by mandate. It's just a corporation and there's some regulations. There is some countries that help entrepreneurs and venture capitalists move. I happen to like Chile. I live in Chile 6 years. I love the country. It's a wonderful country. You can check them out. It changes all the time. You can check them out on the web. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to entertain one more question because we're running out of time, and I want to be able to let people go on with their day. You can use lease is a type of unfunding as well. So lease transform an investment into a cost, and that could be very efficient as well. You can also play with the financial statements as well, so you can move things from cost to investments. But that is a financial class that is not part of these. We're going to have a course on enterprise funding, and I will answer those questions there because I think that's just too detailed. You can also send me an email, and I'll respond to that as well. Well, thank you so much for being here. I hope I can see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the biggest flaws. You need to prevent having mistakes. Make new mistakes. Don't make the old ones. There's a lot of people who have made mistakes. You learn from them. So tomorrow, I hope to see you here between 12 and 12:30 on our next call, day number 4, about what are the major flaws. So thank you so much for coming here. Make sure you join us. Bye-bye.